If I was doing a film class, there's a lot of movies that I would put as required viewing, and this is one of them. As required viewing for my film class. It's my favorite Western. This is Kyle's first time seeing it. I would love to get talk about it.
Well, and as we've talked about before last year when we did the other John Ford film I've seen, because I've only seen two. So when we talked to the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, I watched my first 3 John Wayne films ever. The first one was Hondo, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, True Grit. This would be my 4th John Wayne film, my 2nd John Ford film, The Searchers. Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I am Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us, and thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals to tell us what movies we should review in the future. And both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critic reviews as well as ours. And today we're talking about a John Ford was considered one of his best. And considered it was an AFI's top 100. I don't know where exactly in the top 100 best films of the 20th century. It's The Searchers.
All right. Ethan Edwards has finally returned home following the American Civil War, exhausted and with a heart full of hate. But when his extended family is beset upon by a Comanche tribe, he teams with Martin Pauly on a years-long mission to rescue his niece, Debbie.
Okay, so this came out, I think, in 1956, if I'm right? Okay, I do have, and this is interesting, I do have the 50th anniversary, so you understand with math, came out in 2003. It has great, Martin Scorsese talks about this, John Milius talks about this, and the other one is Curtis Hanson, who did LA Confidential. They talk about this movie. And it's one of the interesting things is this movie got panned hard from critics. We always talk about, well, sometimes a great classic usually gets hard. The critics really trash it, then a lot of people talk about it. And I want to try to, it's really interesting. We talk about John Carpenter's movie, The Thing.
Yeah.
At the time, that got trashed a lot. But the kids loved that movie. And I think a lot of generation of kids go back to and sign the movie and they still appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those jokes of like, oh, you guys aren't ready for this, but your kids are going to love it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
And it's the same thing with The Searchers. I think a lot of people were expecting the heroic John Wayne movies that they understand from the 30s and 40s. They're not going to get this. Yeah. But the kids who went to see it love this movie. And I think it's the same kind of thing. Hey, you're not ready for this movie, but your kids are going to love it. And it spawned, but New Hollywood, a lot of these people still regard this movie as one of the best.
I think that's because the reasons why people would be turned off of this film are the reasons that might fly over younger kids' heads on first viewing. That I don't want, I'm not trying to say kids are dumb and they don't get it, but like there's a lot of things in the film that from a purely story perspective are very, very well shot. Of course, the film is one of the big VistaVision films, if you will.
Shot in Technicolor and VistaVision, yes.
So I think there was something to be said about the movie's story being accessible, but a lot of the themes, symbolism, and whether unintentional or intentional, because there seems to be varying degrees of whether or not they knew this film was kind of about what it was about. Those kinds of things are things that are tough to watch. They're tough to experience people doing that. And John Wayne's character is wholly unlikable in the film.
He's not a hero.
Even though you want him to succeed in the first part of his journey, I guess.
So he's the protagonist, but he's not even an anti-hero. He's repulsive. Yeah. He's a racist. Yeah. And he's self-serving. He doesn't believe in surrender. But the interesting part of, we talked about another movie that didn't show us how talented he is. But there's a lot of mystery, but we know he's skillful because he shows up at his brother's house, Aaron. But you understand there's a really, just from how he interacts with Aaron's wife, there's something there with them.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, again, I went into this movie not
subtle.
knowing
It's
anything.
subtle, like, even like Aaron's oblivious to it. Yeah. But we know there's something.
I think there's a zoom at that point in the movie where he comes in. It's like not like an aggressive zoom, but there's like a little bit where the camera refocuses on the hands, on the kiss, on the embrace, but not enough time where it's something where, like, if they never dived into it at all, which they don't do a lot of in the film with it, it wouldn't mean anything. But watching that, I was like, that's going to mean something.
And it's interesting because it's 3 years after the Civil War, and he's still in uniform. Yeah, and we don't know where the hell he's been for the last 3 years.
But he has a bag full of money,
and he has a minted U.S. brand new, because after
Yeah.
the war they had to print new money, and it's brand new. And even Aaron's like, this is new. It's Yankee. He calls it Yankee dollars. He doesn't
Yep.
want to call it new American money. It's Yankee dollars.
Yep.
But you understand where he's been. He's picked up cultures. He knows how to speak Comanche. He knows all the gestures.
Mm-hmm.
He knows California. He knows all the people. Mo, who's Mo? Yeah, Mo's still around. And it's that vernacular that he speaks is so Western. The stance is so Western.
Mm-hmm.
The throw the money on the thing is so Western that it's only John Wayne can do this portrayal.
Well, and it's. I wonder how much he knew that the character he was playing was kind of antithetical to the image he personified. You know, when he shows up like that, yeah, he's learned a lot about the world, but it's almost like, you know, when someone wins big and they go on tour. You know, this was almost like a lost tour. You know, where it's like he can't return home.
His army lost, so there's nowhere to go home.
Yeah. And I think he traveled the earth. He wandered the earth, you know, and finally found himself needing to go back home, but as a broken man. Like, you know, he on the outside, he still perceives himself as the winner, but he is a broken human being, and he needs to assign blame.
And we don't know how that, is he still broken at the end, or is he found peace? We don't know. This is wild interpretation. So, this is 1956. This is John Ford, after like almost making Westerns and films for almost 30 years. This is probably his most cynical Western. After doing a lot of, this is not the Rico Kid of, hey, Westerns are playground and I'm a good time.
Yeah.
This is not Fort Apache. This is not the She Wore a Yellow Ribbon when the cavalry are the heroes, and this is very heroic in stature. This is goodbye the bad guys. And this is very his nihilistic, but also his most beautiful shot. This is shot in the Monument Valley in Nevada. I think he scoped out this area. It's wonderfully shot. I think he knows how to use camera or kind of portray the camera use. This is Vista Vision, so it filmed horizontal rather than vertical, and it's in Technicolor. His cinematographer is Winston C. Hoach. They did those movies I just cited, but he is the first one to win back-to-back cinematography for, I believe, Joan of Arc, which he didn't do with John Ford or somebody else, but then She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and he won cinematography back-to-back. First time ever. Really? He did a lot of Westerns like Fort Apache and the other ones with John Wayne. John Ford likes to pick up new people and groom them. Like he did with John Wayne.
Yeah.
He discovered John Wayne. Obviously, John Wayne was doing other movies, but for Stagecoach, he kind of plucked him and groomed him. And he did it with Frank S. Nugent being a writer, because Frank S. Nugent was notorious, very scrupulous film critic. And John Ford, all right, you want to know how to do writing? Here's your assignment, kid.
Yeah.
And that's how Frank Nugent got to be a successful screenwriter, writing for John Ford. And I think Winston was another one. He learned on set. I don't think Winston ever went to academic schooling, but he plucked him out from being, you know, one of those production assistants, and worked with him and groomed him what he wants to see. And so you have a lot of this culture of John Ford, and it's kind of a grooming, kind of awful word, but he groomed him to what he wants to visually see.
Yeah.
This is totally a John Ford thing.
Yeah.
And
well, and if you've seen any other recent Oscar nominees for us, you've seen John Ford being able to have his influence on other filmmakers as well.
Yeah,
I won't
Fablemans, right? I mean, we can say it now, right? This is why everybody's so interested in John Ford. John Ford gets credit for being the first director to shoot with a film with a ceiling, because we talked about in Babylon, they would just shoot it outside, right? And there's a movie here and there's a movie here, and they're both sharing the wall. That did happen a lot. That's a kind of a false analogy. But this movie does show a lot of ceiling. There's a lot of ceiling to this one, but also, he was the first time, this is interesting, and Marty Scorsese pointed out, this is wide shot film.
Yeah.
And I think this is actors' playground. You think about actors who like their close-ups, you know, medium or close-up.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of that. There's a lot of action in the background as well as the foreground, but also you get to see the full development of everybody coming in. There's a lot of wide shotting.
Well, yeah, that comes with the Vista Vision, and actually, this film was noted as being something David Lean would watch a lot as he was planning out Lawrence of Arabia, because he needed to figure out, how am I going to shoot a movie on this scale before. And David Lean had done some pretty small films prior to, like, you know, the Lawrence
How do I
of
do
Arabia
this scope? Right.
How do I deal with the scope? And even you can see it, especially early on in the scenes in Aaron's home when Ethan first arrives there. you can see the influence on The Hateful Eight of the inside shots. That house is very similar to Minnie's haberdashery in The Hateful Eight. Every part of the house, like there's the spot where there's the cooking done over there, there's the spot where they're congregating, there's the place in front of the fire. It is all very similar to how it's done in that film. You can see the influence that this division has on the cameras that Tarantino would use for Hateful Eight.
And George Lucas' Star Wars, when Luke comes back to his family home and it's burnt to crest.
Yeah, I definitely
in this
saw
movie
that,
with Ethan Allen. I just want to make it no more. In this movie, it's a lot of controversy with the racism, and John Ford not hiring an authentic Native American to play Scar. It gets kind of an analogy of being racist because Comanches, in true life, they did these raids, but it wasn't part of the tribe. There were outcasted groups of Comanches.
Yeah.
And Scar was an outcasted, kicked out, but he grew up a cult following surround him, kind of a cult personality collection of raiders. And so it doesn't really state it in the book, in the movie, that this is part of their Comanche nation. He was outed.
Yeah.
And collected these. Scar is kind of the mirror image of Ethan Everett. Doesn't really have a home anywhere, sets up everywhere he can be, and is kind of a scavenger as best. But they both know each other's cultures and narratives. Like, you speak good Comanche, did somebody teach you? You speak good English, did somebody teach you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's almost like this mirroring thing that we get a lot of mythologies as well.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a weird, I'm going to make a weird comparison here. It's almost like how in every single Marvel movie, the first villain the Marvel character faces off with is an inverse of themselves. Yeah. If you watch any of those first Marvel films, it's always the opposite of the hero, and that's kind of what this is these two guys are more, there's that off-quoted line of, we're not so different, you and I. That appears in a lot of films. That's how the two of them are. Ford got noted for hiring a lot of authentic Native American actors in the film, but just like not in the big roles. So it was kind of that thing where it's like he was giving the smaller roles to people and helping give money to some of these smaller communities, but not really in like the major appearances. So it's kind of like you're doing like one step forward and two steps back kind of a thing. But it all kind of fits too with the ideas is that it's not a comfortable movie. Because
it's not one of those relax, let's go watch a country western.
Yeah, it's a few steps removed from it. Where like the main plot is classic western, but
even the score.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you also have these elements like racial attitudes of him coming home and not liking someone because of the color of their skin.
I'm mistaking you for a half breed.
Yeah,
well, I'm not.
Well, his
and then he has this disdain. He's putting sugar in his coffee. And he's just sneering him.
Yeah. This miscegenation that he has towards Jeffrey Hunter's character Martin, in that like he's 1/8 Cherokee, is that what he says?
Yeah,
and it's like not good enough.
Right.
It's diluted now, and it's this weird thing of we're 15 years removed from the height of World War II, where race was one of the big defining factors of that, and how like the bloodlines are unpure was how Hitler saw it. So like. It's not. I don't think it's any coincidence that John Wayne's character is very Hitler-esque in his thoughts about the bloodline.
And it's also it's not just that there's native being a racist, but it's at his core. It's this disdain. It's in him. It's like it's in his DNA.
Yeah.
And we see the other captured girls in that exit scene. Like John Ford doesn't move the camera a lot for that, but that when he turns around for the one last noise the girl makes, and he turns around. And then John Ford doesn't show his eyes. He just pivots, and you see that close-up. And like, oh, my God, he's going to murder her. Mm-hmm. He just has that disdain for her now. Yeah. And you're like, they're not white anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, his idea, too, and like
but
the
that was
fact
great
that...
I was just when I established that technique, because John never... I mean, he moves tracking shots and everything.
Yeah.
But he usually just sets the camera almost and just go.
Yeah.
Like in the interior scenes. But then when it's really moving in, then we know it's...
Well, and that's what creates the wrinkle in the film, is that had the last half hour of the film not happened the way it did, it would be a pretty standard Western. Yeah, a lot of Westerns tended to have some pretty off views about cowboys and Indians, kind of, like
but he lists Debbie the same way he did when she was a girl.
Exactly, yeah.
And at the end, he does the same thing.
And that's kind of the saving grace, is that he's willing to kind of connect with her one more time on a level that he hadn't been up until this point. But yeah, he's really confronting his own racial biases, and he never really changes them He just changes one person. He changes his perception of one person. But it's kind of I can see why that would put people off. It's not a film that's comfortable.
What do you want me to do? Draw you a picture?
Yeah.
Right. But my favorite scene, and I think it really encapsulates the movie, is when he takes his gun out and shoots the Comanche in the eyes.
Oh,
and Walter
okay.
Bond's like, "What the hell did that do?" And he's like, "Hey, your religion, I'm not listening to it, but what he believes, he's done for."
If he's right, I want him to suffer for it.
Yeah.
Like if his religion is correct, I want him to be at pain for what he did. And I think that's something he's willing to go further than killing.
Yeah.
He's going to literal damnation in the minds of his
The
enemies.
wandering, yeah, and we talked about a lot of essays and a lot of critiques of it. He's already condemned.
Yep.
And he's already dealing with that.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do, you're going to be condemned. He knows that at the end of the movie. He's not part of this. That's part of it. That's his family, but he's not part of it.
No.
And he's destined to whistle in the wind still.
Yeah.
Just traveling to the next adventure. One of the interesting people, and it seems like a character, is Mose Harper.
Yeah.
And he's got some of the best lines.
Oh, I loved him in the movie.
I'll pay you $1 million. I don't need $1 million. I just want my rocking chair by the fire.
Yep.
That's it. But he also does these a lot of, these comedies. We're going to the river. Ready, Mo? I've been baptized.
Yeah.
I'm okay. It's just
Yeah.
like this awkwardness that kind of lightens up the mood a little bit. But he also has the best lines in the movie.
So he was based on a real person, a very different real person, but a drunk of a person who was kind of wandered around those kinds of areas.
Yeah.
And people knew him. I don't think it was Mose, but it was like a different Mo something, and it was a different name. But he was kind of based on this archetype of like the peculiarities of being alone outside, I think, for too long. He reminded me a lot of Tom Cullen, a character from Stephen King's The Stand, who had these kind of like vocal tics that he would say. Tom Cullen would always talk about M-O-O-N, that spells such and such. And Mose is kind of that same person, too.
Shut up, Mo. Thank you kindly.
Yeah, and then he'll repeat himself, and it's kind of that nervous tick of it all. Fascinating character, one of my favorite characters that every time he popped up, I was like, hey, he's back.
Yeah.
Hey, cool.
I also talk about lines is not only the vernacular of John Wayne saying his lines are very Western, but he has that catchphrase, "That'll be the day." He also says that again in other movies. It's almost like Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, "I'll be back."
Yeah.
But in this movie, "That'll be the day." And then Buddy Holly wrote a song called "That'll Be the Day."
There's that rumor that Buddy Holly was influenced by that line because he loved the movie so much, but
Yeah.
I wonder, but I think, it's an interesting story nonetheless.
But it's a nice, and he doesn't, you can't curse yet in movies, and he calls him Blanket Head.
Yeah.
Let's go, Blanket
Which
Head.
is just enough where you're like, oh, like.
You get it, Reverend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about another side character we talked about one of my best supporting actors is Ward Bond. And he plays a reverend. He's also done a lot of other movies with John Wayne. They think that they did The Godfather, Sure, Yellow Ribbon. And he's one of these other supporting actors. And he's another counterweight to John Wayne. You need somebody that's almost of the same character counterweight. He's almost like a balance to John Wayne's. Almost like, I would say when I write, he's almost like the conscientious character. Almost like he knows he's in the story.
Yeah.
He also has the weight. He's also the religious character component to like, all right, let's not go too far here, John Wayne.
Yeah, he is Reverend Captain Sam Johnson, which is a heavy name, and also a very Blazing Saddles-esque name that you can see where that...
Very Western, right, yeah.
Samuel Johnston is right. I wish that this kind of diving into a little bit of my review on it, but like, I wish that the other searchers stayed in the film longer. Because I found that the large group was very entertaining for me. And my favorite scenes in the movie were the large group together.
But
And
Ward
when they-
Bond's
when they
character
leave.
very much, he understands.
Yeah.
We're not small enough, and we're not big. We're too big.
Yeah.
We need to get less.
Yeah.
Or we're going to be seen, and we don't have enough arms. But yeah.
Yeah, I just found that the dynamic of those characters to be the most enthralling part of the
Jorgensen
film.
and then the Swedish family.
Yeah. What I think is interesting about the Jorgensen is so that's Harry Carey's son.
Yeah.
Harry Carey's wife, I believe, is playing
Harry Carey Jr.'s.
the mother. Yeah, and so he actually was kind of giving a little bit of a hide to Harry Carey Sr., who had passed away. And I think even John Wayne himself did like something near the end of the film, like he made like a move that was a very Harry Carey Sr. move.
Yes.
It's kind of homage. It seemed like a tight-knit community, the Western Guild.
I want to talk about another film technique that John Ford usually established very well. It's the reading of the letter and then going back to flashback.
Yeah, that was
because
good.
it's an automatic reflex. You want to do the soft dissolve and flashback, but here you get her speaking the lines, but then slowly you have Martin Pauly say the lines, and it's just a cut.
Yep.
And it cuts back to her still reading the story. Where a lot of people would just go, oh, just go soft dissolve, and we'll go back, and then we'll come back.
Yep.
But John Ford understands the technique that it's still, you can just use the flashbacks, but it seems as it's happening now.
But
It's a great technique.
It also showcases the passage of time, because that's something that I was concerned about when I realized that this was going to be a film that would span years on this search.
Yeah.
I was like, how are you gonna make me believe that this has taken years? You know, outside of just switching to snow for a scene and then switching back away from snow. How are you going to convince me of time passing? And you're right, it's not just the dissolve to the flashback. It's returning to the letter and then dissolving again and returning to it becomes its own
but it is no
framing
dissolve.
device.
It's just a cut.
Yeah. But it's returning to that time period that allows it to kind of almost make a mini film inside the narrative.
Yes.
Where the framing device is the letter reading.
Yep.
And then that scene ends and it's just over. We're just moving on with the movie. It kind of breaks narrative structure by creating a microcosm inside the narrative.
And it's a great, after they're fighting for her love at the wedding, but then they still fight inside, and they still see the dust kicking up.
I really love when they're inside and they get fighting again, and all of a sudden you can't tell what's happening. Those little details of the film, I think, are what
There's
make
some little bit of comedy
time.
into it.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of comedy.
but again, the comedy is never forced. It's mined from the realistic situation. It's again like there's a slight amount of absurdity to them kicking the dust off themselves in the white church, kind of the white painted walls and flooring. That's funny because we think about that. We think about the tracking of dust. It's that kind of comedy that works really well because it's not intentional, and if you don't laugh at it, it doesn't hurt the narrative.
But I like the technique because you think actors want their close up, but this is not a lot of medium shots. This is wide scale shots.
It's a VistaVision, baby.
Yeah.
Never put the camera, straight at someone.
Right. And I think it's an actor's medium. It's kind of weird to say, especially if you're out in the distance. It's a wonderful actor's medium because you have to fill in the entire scene. You can't just cut out a camera because you're in still camera when you go to the bar in the background. You have to keep playing it.
Yeah. It would be very difficult to film this movie today because of
content.
Just because of the amount of filming in Arizona, in an area that's my in-laws live in Arizona, and they know how heavily trafficked that portion of Arizona is. Yeah. You'd never be able to film VistaVision with that high amount of visual. You also never convinced me that was Texas, but neither here nor there.
All right, up next is our review. It's going to be pretty quick for me of The Searchers.
So I should notice, I don't dislike any genre, but Western is probably my least viewed genre. I looked it up online. I've seen 60 Westerns in my life, which is not that many for a guy that's seen 4,000
That's what the entire
movies.
Westerns they made in like 1950.
Yeah, so I've only seen like a small, maybe 2% of the films I've ever watched have been Westerns. So this right now would probably be, at least as far as the 2 John Ford films I've seen, the 4 John Wayne films I've seen, my favorite of those.
Yeah. This, everybody believes, including his friends, and a lot of he should have won the Academy Award for this one.
Okay, so this is the Scorsese Goodfellas of the 50s.
Right, but everybody believes this is John Ford should have won because obviously he wins for True Grit.
Yeah,
but everybody's like, this one he should have won for.
I like the clean cut Westerns, but I also really like the Westerns that get dirty and get complicated. And this is a very complicated Western where even the good guys are not good, and the bad guys are not bad. It's just the way in which they are framed about it. Everyone's just kind of existing in their film in this nebulous series of good to bad decisions, and a lot of them make multiple decisions.
If you're a good, wholesome person, you're dead.
Yeah. It reminds me of, that's been kind of the complex story of recent fantasy, is a lot of fantasy has gone dark, and it's been, if you're a good person in a fantasy story, you're going to die because you can't survive the real world. Like
I said, this is, after his whole arc, this is John Ford going cynical with Westerns. After this Gallatin and everybody.
But why not? You've already done all the cheery ones.
The cheery ones of, hopping from horse to horse on Stagecoach and everything.
I think, let me just talk about the things that I didn't like about the films, because there's not many, but I just think I should point out what those are. I didn't like that the scene was deleted in which he finds Lucy's body. I think that would have been an important scene. I think the showing, don't telling of him finding Lucy's body instead of just relaying to Jorgensen
at the end
about
like, what happened to your jacket?
Yeah, where he tells her, like, well, well, not even just that, but like when they say, like, I saw Debbie, but I didn't see Lucy. And he's like, well, Lucy's dead. And he tells, like, the guy that his girlfriend, his fiance, is dead. And they shot the scene. I know they shot the scene, and it was deleted from the finished cut. That should have been in the movie. Because it's a scene that
too daring for 56.
Maybe, but there could have been something done for it. I think the telling don't showing for that scene completely misses the emotional resonance.
In the house when it's on fire.
Yeah.
That's a good not show because he punches him in the face. Don't look in there.
Yeah.
You're like, my God, if John Wayne doesn't want you to go in there and it's tough enough for John Wayne, then I don't want to see it.
That's the heightened sense of
And I think they want to do that same kind of reaction with the house on fire and what happened to his sister-in-law.
Yeah, I just don't think the exchange works. But then there's the follow-up is so good that it would have been better had the exchange been better, had the scene been better, where he's running towards them in anger and vengeance, and then Ethan stops Martin and says, "No, don't go. Like it's too late for him." And then you hear him shoot, and then you hear him die, and you hear the scene fade to black. It's such a dark moment for the film.
Yes.
That would have worked better. I also would have liked to have spent just a few moments with Ethan after the end of the film, because I do know that I want to see how he's changed as a character. I don't think he's gotten any better, but I want to see how this experience has changed him.
People like Martin Scorsese's right. It's the ending that you fill in the blanks based on your personality, like Inception.
Yeah.
If you think he's already condemned, then there's nothing he can do, and he's going to be damned forever, and he's just whistling wind. Or something like he finally retains some humanity by not killing Deborah, and he's rejuvenated and something. Maybe he's going back into some kind of hopefulness. But he understands barriers.
Yeah. I would have liked to have seen more of Ford's interpretation of the scene, though, instead of leaving it open. I do think there's a certain level of open-endedness that I'm comfortable with, and I think that give us a little bit. We followed this guy for years on this journey. I want to see what you think of his character. That's just my little like nitpicks where it's like I would have.
I like open-ended or whatever. Yeah, and we both don't like those endings, and I love those open-ended. It can go either way, and you like a little bit like just find something.
If he wasn't the main focus of the story, if we spent if Martin was our protagonist and Wayne was the guy carrying him through this journey, that would be one thing. But we're following Ethan, and I think Ethan's story should have.
But I think with the hand gesture, that's kind of a gesture, I think, to Harry Carey.
Yeah, that was his moment of that.
It's almost like he's regarded himself as wounded.
Yeah,
almost.
And I respect the fact the film has that opening shot that is mirrored with the closing shot of the door closing.
Very much like Wizard of Oz. She's the opening of the door, and this is the world. I
think this opening shot of walking into that VistaVision beautiful color.
See, we only get it in 35 millimeter. I think if you went as a kid and you saw that almost like an IMAX, it'd be like punched you in the face.
Yeah, I was really I think it is a more effective shot than the Wizard of Oz one. I think the opening scene of them walking out into this dusty landscape is more effective to me than Wizard of Oz was, because I didn't.
One of my favorite techniques in the movie is when Lucy realizes it's a raid because her mom turns off the lamp.
Oh,
and it's very red outside. I don't know if they probably gelled up the scenes, and they close up right in her face, and then she realizes what's happening, and then her mom slaps her.
Yeah,
it's like when I talk about the movie, it's not the violence in the movie, it's the repercussions and upcoming violence. It's like, this is terrifying. Yeah,
it's similar to. I guess it's similar to how, decades later, Tarantino would do the Reservoir Dogs. We're not going to show the diamond heist. We're going to show everything around it.
We're not going to show you cut his ear off, but we're going to pan off.
But you're going to know what happened, and you're going to feel like you've seen it. We feel like we saw the raid happen because we saw everything leading up to the deaths. We saw them getting so terrified. It's all in performance. Yeah. It's their reaction to something that.
But he moves the camera. He doesn't move the camera very much, but so we know when he moves the camera and then the lights, almost like it's a shut-in.
Yeah.
Then you know it's serious trouble.
And we convince ourselves that, as viewers, that Debbie and Lucy are going to get away, because they do escape out the back of the house. Like they're like go into hiding, get out the back, get away. Yeah. And we see the burning, and we're like, okay, but they're okay somewhere. They're hiding somewhere. And it's only then that we realize, no, they didn't get away either. Like, they're captured. They're part of it. And I think it's those amounts of dread that I think fuel the film, because Westerns don't often get into that deep dread.
It is a very cynical, nihilistic dread movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So. I was taken by the film. I can see why it didn't work for some people in 1956. I can see why it wouldn't work for some people now.
Because it's the iconic John Wayne, and then you're supposed to hate him, and that's tough to digest, right?
Yeah, and part of it is that I've never found John Wayne to be John Wayne is not a layered, nuanced, subtle actor. I think he sees the lines and he reads the lines. This is a movie that is made around him, and I think that is where the key of John Ford's skill comes into play, is that he's using John Wayne in exactly the way that you need to get something great out of him.
Only him can,
You know?
like, I'm going after this guy, and his name is Scar, and he throw the tequila on the fire.
Yeah.
Only John Wayne can get away with it. Everybody else is like, what the hell are you doing?
That's the thing, is like he's got like a checklist of things he's great at. It's a small checklist, but it's there, and it's like John Ford knows, like, okay, we got to do this stuff because then people are really they're gonna see what this guy can do.
And then that scene when he throws the tequila into the fire,
Yeah.
the stove, and it starts on fire.
Yeah.
A journeyman filmmaker will kick the sound Western music score.
Mm.
And like, all right, time for the action. That's the action cue. John Ford does not put the music in.
Nope.
He lets it settle.
Instead, he lets an extra try to put the fire out because
Right.
it's obvious that the fire went a little too hard in that scene, because there's a guy that runs in and tries to like put it out as he's walking out of the scene.
But that's perfect because a journeyman filmmaker, cue the music.
Yep.
Everything. Oh, cut. We're going to go right into the next scene. That's a good leeway. But John Ford, let it settle. Let's see the danger of John Ford being around. Oh my God, you started a fire. I'm going to put this out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's partially because, too, again, the film has that has
Yeah.
that downtroddenness to it, that even them learning information like this doesn't sound like a good thing. There's no information gained throughout the film that sounds like a good thing,
No.
even though they are necessarily trying to save someone's life.
So, have you seen The Searchers?
Yeah, let us know down below your thoughts on this film. Give us your favorite John Ford film. I think he did like 300 movies or something. So like,
If you didn't know, Ron Howard's movie The Missing is a very much homage to this movie.
Oh, okay.
If you have it with Tommy Lee Jones,
Yeah.
The Missing, it's
Huh.
very much like this.
Well,
Where-
if for you guys that don't know, Warner Brothers for years had a remake in development. I'm talking almost a decade or two, had a remake in development that was going to be a sci-fi futuristic version of this film,
Yeah.
where the main characters were going to find Debbie and she was going to be a zombie. It sat on a shelf. You can find the screenplay. It is something.
it's called Searchers.
I can't remember what the exact title changed to, but it
If you
was
guys
like going
know
to be
about it,
The
let me know.
Searchers. I've got a friend searching for a copy right now to get to me because I want to read the screenplay.
Searching for The Searchers.
I've seen bits and pieces of this development, but it's shocking to me. So let us know down below what you thought. Would you like to see a zombie future version of The Searchers? We'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you guys for joining us. Please like and subscribe. They're 2 free things that help to join the channel, and they make sure that we keep on living and doing what we want to do. And you
Exactly.
get getting good stuff too. So
Thank you again.
thank you. You can find all my film reviews over at GoFilmReviews.com.
You can find my show, The St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts, and that'll be the day.